Hello, and thank you for joining us. This is No Soundbites Allowed, and I am your host, Michael Voss, Dragon of the Southern Tier. And I want to explain what happened on December 7th at a New York State college, a public college, where students were trained on becoming racist, in my opinion, and were indoctrinated into a progressive ideology. I denounced the event, and I, again, denounce what you're going to see and what was done. I do not agree, and I have disagreed strongly. Justice by itself needs no descriptor. Justice is universal, and it is not defined by someone's color of skin or their race or gender or sexual preference. It has nothing to do with that. But social justice is defined in terms of race. It is defined in terms of categories. In fact, it is required that individuals no longer exist and that any individual is only a part of a category. It is based on categories of people, not individuals. Social justice at its root is about politics. It's about power. It's about making individuals act in a manner that is approved by a smaller elite group of individuals. That is inescapable. There were approximately 30 people in the room as it started. That room was comprised of 75% of individuals that appeared to be white. There were 25% of the people in the room that appeared to be people of color. One individual was apparently Asian, and there were a couple of people who were perhaps Arabic or Hispanic, with the remaining group looking to be black. So that's the breakdown of the room. This test run was presented to students who were given extra credit for taking place. I can tell you that the students that I interacted with, to each and every one of them, mentioned that they were here because of the extra credit they would receive in various classes at SUNY Broome. That they were not here of their own volition, but that they were brought to be able to get credit. So they were bribed, because most people in public do not want to dissent. We see that in our politics on a regular basis. We see that in elections. We see this constantly in our lives. People do not want to be ostracized. They do not want to be isolated. They don't want to be the odd person out. And so in putting a group together and putting people into small groups where they are intimately now connected with each other, you have now created a bond. And it makes it harder for people in that small, more intimate group to be able to object, to be able to say that they don't agree, because they're expected to go with the consensus, to go with the flow. This is a tactic that is used, and it is used to brainwash individuals. How can you have an open and honest conversation if you're not allowed to have differing points of view? If all the information you're presented and all of the data that you are presented is from a single point of view, how can you have a critical thought about it? How can you critically say this is correct or not correct? How do you make that basis if you have nothing else to compare? That's something that's important to understand about these kind of events and what is being pushed onto students. These students don't have any other data than what is being presented to them. They have no other information than what is being given to them. They have no way of understanding what is fact and what is opinion because there is no other voice. So there is nothing open about this. This is closed. This is a closed system. In fact, at my table, people mentioned, well, a debate is like what we see in the presidential debate. No, that isn't a debate. That's a political event. But that's not a debate. We haven't had debates in our politics in many decades. Lincoln Douglas was a debate. But what we saw in 2020 and in many years prior, that's not debating. That's just people spouting sound bites. That's what our politics are today. They are exchanges of sound bites, but not an actual debate of the issues. Deliberation leads you to the end goal as created by the person who presents the deliberation. And you need to move towards that and step away from whatever position you may have to get closer to the position of that deliberation, of that goal that has been presented for you. You are being programmed. You are being taken from wherever you may stand and being shifted to where they want you, the organizers want you to be. That is a very fundamental understanding of what is the basis of this event, which we'll be talking about racism and institutional racism. You're not supposed to oppose this. You're supposed to come to a consensus. You're going to move from wherever your position is to the position of the progressive ideology. Again, look at what we're being told. You're going to go through this process and you're going to end at a point that has already been predetermined. The outcome is already known. You have no choice in this system. It is closed. You have no other voices that are introduced into this system. You have only one path, and you must walk down that path to some extent. That's a problem. So you've now characterized those that may have a differing point of view as an extremist, as someone who is discreditable. When the New York Post in October of 2020 presented the Hunter Biden laptop and emails from that laptop, we were told by most of social media and many in the news media that that was a conspiracy theory, that that wasn't correct, that it wasn't true. And yet, 4 months after the election, those same news media outlets and social media itself told us, oh, but the laptop is real and it is true. So the conspiracy theory wasn't a theory nor a conspiracy, it was fact. What about Russia collusion? We were told, well, this was absolutely true. It's absolutely factual. Except after 3 years of investigations from 4 different organizations spending over $30 million, we learned none of it was correct, none of it was true. That Rachel Maddow and Representative Adam Schiff, who claimed to have evidence to prove their claims of Russia collusion, were lying to you. You're saying, don't introduce information that isn't accepted by the news media, that isn't accepted by social media, that isn't a consensus thought, which doesn't mean it's correct. It doesn't mean that it's accurate. You just can't go off the reservation. You can't get off of the path. This is what progressivism is in our colleges. It sounds very nice. It sounds very pleasant. It is presented in the nicest way possible, and it is insidious and it is wrong. Again, I'm not making a personal attack on the presenters and the members of the Civic Engagement Board. That's not the case. I'm talking about the material and the process. So let's look at these questions. The first question, it's been 20 minutes in the event. We have been put into small cells. We have been in groups just large enough that no one wants to be ostracized, and the group dynamics works against an individual. We have been given a path that we have been reinforced. We cannot deviate from. We must reach the end goal of the material, of the conclusion that this has all been predetermined. There is no individuality. There is no free thought. And we now, after having that well established and reinforced several times to us, we now have the first actual question that they want us to look at. Talk about a time when you felt out of place. Is that inherently racist? We have on the screen being told to us systemic racism explained. So the implied thought is the context of this is systemic racism. Talk about a time when you felt out of place because of systemic racism. That experience might have occurred at an educational or religious or social event. which is systemic racism. It's a system, and it is racist. How did you feel about the systemic racism? If they did not want to program you to reach an outcome that they have already pre-selected, they would not have the systemic racism explained. They wouldn't have that on the screen. That would not be part of the question that is presented to the public. If they removed systemic racism explained, then you would have a question that does not imply racism. This is very subliminal, and this is very well done by some of the best educators out there to use these tiny subliminal cues to lead you on a path, to deny you free thought, to deny you critical thinking. Somehow, in those elements of our stories talking about the different sizes of cities and going to a dance, that was racist. And the way they're looking at this, it inherently must be that Jamal must be poor and the white kid must be white for what they're about to say to be true. Because if you start changing those elements, which exist in the real world, then what they're about to say doesn't work. It doesn't make sense. So you have been set up. This is a trap, and you're being programmed. Do you notice something? Did you notice that the example that they used was Chicago, a city noted for its corruption, from 1860? 1860, over 100 years ago, 150 years ago, and they used Chicago, a city that for the past 75 years has been run by progressives and Democrats. And yet they're talking about the problems in that city, not in terms of the crime, but they're talking about the denial of opportunity to individuals, as they claim in this video, in Chicago, where they're supposed to be progressive, where Democrats have been in control and have been working on the problem of this institutional racism they're talking about for the last 70 years. Wait a minute. Black people have been denied. There's no black people who owned homes from 1860 until 2021. In over 150 years, there's been no one who's ever owned a home? Are we correct about that? No one has been able to get a home in America that is black, and because they have been denied this. Is that what they're suggesting? Because that's what they've just shown you, and that's the message they're telling you. Black people can't buy homes. By the way, I am a black Hispanic homeowner. 2017, in Chicago, one of the most progressive cities in the United States, possibly the third or fourth, depending on how you want to characterize it, most progressive city in the United States. A city that has 75 years of Democrat and progressive leadership at every level of the government. And in 2017, under President Obama, they remain a problem location. Progressives failed. Their ideology failed. Their laws failed. They have failed, and yet we are supposed to accept that they are the best choice, that their path is the only path, that we must follow this all the way through, that systemic racism, it must be true because the progressives failed. Their ideologies and their plans failed. And now, because they failed, we now must follow them. This entire event is about political activism. It is about creating political activists. It is about converting students into progressives. This was very frustrating and aggravating. At every step of this event, as I had expected, as I had been presented in the past, this was racist. This is a racist indoctrination of our youth, of our college students, and of our culture. I denounce it completely. Again, not the individuals. I understand that the individuals at SUNY Broome and members of the Civic Engagement Board had the best intentions but the best intentions are the pavement on the road to hell. And that's the thing. I have critically thought about critical race theory. I have critically thought about the gender and identity politics, the intersectionality, and the progressive movement. I speak with many progressives on a regular basis. I read much of the literature from progressives on a regular basis. I understand. I don't agree. I don't support those things. I don't think America supports those things. And for good reason, because it is racist. It is inherently racist. It is inherently detrimental to our nation and to our society, and they are tearing America apart, and they are destroying our kids. They're destroying our colleges. You may disagree. You may think I am wrong. I respect that you can have your opinion and you can come to your own conclusion as an individual because you're not a category. You're not just a group, and you aren't stuck on a path with a predetermined outcome. You get to make choices. That's not what they support, but it is what I support. If you've made it this far into the video, I thank you. I ask you to share it with others and to leave your comments about what you think. I hope to see you every Sunday at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for our live stream where we will address this and many other issues from around the globe. Thank you.